Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, today it's time to talk about something a little bit different because I see a lot of the same complaints or comments every single season in Diablo 4, and I want to just sort of address a load of these together under a simple theme, which is how to make every single season of Diablo 4 better for yourself. Some things I know a lot of people aren't or haven't done that will simply make your experience smoother and more enjoyable in Season 7, and hopefully even beyond that as well, aside from any major changes that happen to be made to any of these things in the future, of course. First things first then, from the very start, there is a sort of newer one here, but do the Vessel of Hatred campaign on normal difficulty tier. If you just want to make it to endgame in Season 7, and likely moving forwards too, you'll want to just do specifically the expansion campaign on normal difficulty to get most of the way to level 60 in just a few hours. The difference between experience, doing the campaign on normal, and even on penitent is minuscule, because the majority of the experience reward comes from quest completion hand-ins, which do not scale with your difficulty tier. The amount that you are slowed down by doing a higher difficulty tier and doing the monsters, or even bosses in the improved difficulty 2, makes it just not worth it at all for the monster killing XP that you get. If you're caring about efficiency, you want to do it on the lowest difficulty possible. The game is more fulfilling to play in higher difficulties, of course, and prior to the expansion, the base game campaign was too long to be worth not skipping for speed leveling, and everything else scaled with difficulty well enough that it was worth pushing higher tiers as soon as possible. But from this point, moving forward in Diablo 4, the Vessel of Hatred campaign on normal difficulty is an extremely quick and simple way to get the most of the way to max level, and you'll want to take advantage of that pretty much every season, and I would assume when the next expansion happens, it'll probably just change to being that campaign moving forward too. And if you didn't do this in Season 6, you definitely want to try it out in Season 7. After that, a sort of transitionary tip between early game and end game for the game: play multiple builds. Yes, it can feel inefficient at first, and for the most part, most players go into the season with a build in mind that they want to play, and that's why they choose the class they do, and they try to do it from level 1 all the way to max level, all the way deep into endgame, and then they stop. This, in 9 out of 10 cases, is not really an effective way to spend your time, however, if your goal is to have that build be as strong and enjoyable to play as possible, because the vast majority of the time, the build that is the best at farming is not the one that's the best at something like pit pushing. The builds that are really good in Torment 4 aren't necessarily the ones that are better earlier than that, or it's maybe just not the one that you find to be the most enjoyable. So my main point here is I want you to be a bit more open to the idea of using a build around the Torment 1 to Torment 3 stage of the game progression that is built for speed, and using that with the purpose of farming the build that you want to be in for the rest of the season. An example for this is something like a Whirlwind Barbarian. It's really slow to start with. It really comes to its own when you get around Torment and you start getting the right gear around it, but it's really rough to use from the start, and a lot of people try to start with Whirlwind Barbarian and then have some problems. Another example is something like Necromancer with Bone Spirit, and if you try to do that before you have the gear to make it work, it just will not feel good in the slightest. So instead, what you need to use is choose a completely different build that is more efficient for farming and better at the earlier game section, and you can use this to get the gear that you need to make those builds happen. It may sound like a simple tip on the surface, but it's one I know a lot of people would benefit from actually taking to heart. Past that, a bit further